I was stretched out on the sofa the other night thinking about how the next day I was going to be 65 years old. And I remembered how I used to, for a few years, I made it a sort of a personal tradition to take some sort of psychedelic on the day of my birthday and sort of reevaluate my life in the previous year. And, you know, sometimes it would be acid or mushrooms or whatever I had available. And I haven't done that for 25 years. And I was thinking how really I very seldom take the time to sort of think about my life and the things that happened and what I've done. And you know, why not? Why couldn't? Why shouldn't I do that? Even though I'm not doing drugs, I could sit around and sort of contemplate the nature of my life and what's been happening. So I was thinking, you know, really, what's it like to be 65? And I can't tell you. I have no idea. I got to thinking about my life and the things that had happened, and somehow it didn't add up. It didn't, it was incomprehensible somehow. I couldn't get a grip on it. I couldn't grasp really all the things that have happened to me. I've been married 4 times, you know, I'm currently married. I have a degree, a year of graduate school from the university, and I worked for 32 years on the railroad. All these things happened to me. And somehow, really, all I'm aware of is my current projects. You know, what are the things I'm doing now, and what the next little problem is, the next little issue, what I'm dealing with. And I don't have any way of understanding. It may be really, it is not possible to understand what it is like, what it is to be a human being in any kind of a broad sense. You know, I mean, in a very practical, everyday sense, I can understand that I'm 65 and now I can buy a $24 BART ticket for $9 and I get Medicare. So, you know, that's comprehensible, that's understandable. But to see my life in perspective, to see it as some kind of a whole is incomprehensible. So I got to thinking about the things that had happened, and I thought about the first things that I could remember. And I thought, well, maybe if I just sort of go through my life and think about all the things that have happened, it will somehow sort of begin to make sense in some sort of whole way, in some sort of sense of a complete thing, instead of just being sort of a mishmash the way it is now. It's very difficult. So the first thing that I remember, I was walking through a doorway and I felt something touch the inside of my thigh, which was naked, my left thigh, as a matter of fact, as I recall. I took a couple more steps and I looked back to see what it was. And there in the doorway was a little turd. And that was the doorway to my parents' bedroom. And I'd been walking out of it, and through the eastern window, the morning light was sweeping across the floor and bathing this little creation of mine in sunlight. And I remember this feeling of wonder at this thing and where it had come from. That was incomprehensible at that age, you know. I really don't know how old I was, but obviously I wasn't potty trained. And there were quite a few mysteries at that age. I think a little later I noticed one day that when I peed, it was yellow and it reminded me of orange juice. And it occurred to me to wonder if pee tasted like orange juice. And I thought it would be a wonderful thing if it did. And so somehow I managed, I still can't imagine how I did this without making a huge mess. Maybe I did make a huge mess, but I somehow managed to bend over and pee into my mouth. And it did not taste at all like orange juice. I was terribly disappointed. And that was the end of that experiment. I have a target. Let's see, get all my pee memories out of the way. I think I was standing. Our house had a front porch, and the house that faced our front porch had an unobstructed view, and it wasn't that far away, maybe 50 feet. Oh, it's maybe further than that, maybe. You know, as far as from here to the other side of a fairly wide street. So I remember standing on the edge of the porch and peeing off the edge. And as it happened, there were 3 teenage girls who lived in the house next door, across in front of us. And they, whoever was at the window at the time called the others, and the 3 of them were standing looking out the windows, laughing and saying something about Norm's peeing off the porch. And they thought it was terribly hilarious. And my reaction was sort of nonplussed. It was like, what's the big deal? I could imagine what was causing the excitement. Later on, I had another experience with those. One of those girls was babysitting my brother and I, and with a girlfriend of hers, none brothers, sisters, just one of them. And I don't know where my parents were, but it was raining, and they let us do something that my parents never would have, and that's play in the rain. There was a ditch in front of their house. It was a grassy ditch, and had quite a lot of water in it. And they let us get out there and splash around and play in the ditch. It was quite fun. We just loved it, thought we were in heaven. And it occurred to them after a bit that my parents were going to come home and find us with wet clothes, and they might not approve of their letting us play in the rain. And so they hustled us inside and squeezed the water out of our clothes and hung them in front of the oven to dry, and put us in the bed. My little brother and I, he was a year something younger than me. And I remember them lifting up the covers from the bottom of the bed and looking at our young bodies. And one said to the other, "They're so little." And they were, of course, very little. And I don't know that they expected us to have adult sexual organs or what at that age, but they seemed impressed by the small size. Tasting the urine experience reminds me of another one where my mother was baking something that included vanilla in the ingredients. And the vanilla smelled so wonderful. I thought it had the most wonderful smell. And I wondered if it would taste exactly the way it smelled. And so I managed to sneak the bottle and take a small sip, and another disappointment. It was horrible, of course. It was largely alcohol. It burned my little throat. And so I had another taste disappointment in life. I guess that's what that age is about exploring the world and finding out what tastes and what feels and so forth and so on. And there are a few more things that happened there, and I think I may have run out of time, so we'll save them for another time. In the meantime, you may have your own experiences, not quite the same as mine perhaps, but if you would take the time and think about them and think, who was I at that time? And in what way does that experience relate to who I am now? And is there some way that my life is a complete whole that I can look at as a sort of a thing, an entity? Or is it all just a jumble of things that don't really add up in any comprehensible way? That'll give you something to think about.